It's often said that we use only 10% of our brain. The idea is everywhere, in movies, motivational speeches, even in classrooms. But here's the truth. It's simply not accurate. Modern neuroscience has thoroughly disproven this claim. Functional MRI scans and other imaging technologies show that virtually all regions of the brain are active at some point during the day, even while we sleep. The origin of this myth is unclear, but it's likely tied to early misinterpretations of brain research from over a century ago. Psychologist William James once remarked that we are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. That statement, taken out of context, morphed into the 10% myth. What we now know is that the brain is a complex network of billions of neurons and trillions of connections. Even a simple action, like drinking water, requires coordination across multiple regions: motor control, sensory processing, decision-making, and more. No single area works in isolation. In fact, damage to even a small part of the brain can result in noticeable impairments, proving that each region serves a purpose. So why does this myth persist? Because it appeals to the idea that we have untapped potential. And that part is true, but not because 90% of our brain is asleep. It's because most people haven't learned how to engage the brain efficiently. The issue isn't usage, it's integration. The question becomes, how do we access more of our cognitive abilities at once? How do we unlock not just isolated regions, but the synergy between them? That's the real key to optimizing brain function. Forget the 10% figure. The brain isn't a machine running at low power. It's a dynamic system that reflects how we live, think, and focus. And with the right tools and awareness, we can begin to shape it intentionally. If this gave you a new perspective on how your brain actually works, make sure to hit the subscribe button. There's so much more to explore, and this is just the beginning. Let's keep unlocking the full potential of your mind. Together, most people believe neurons do all the heavy lifting in the brain. After all, they're the cells that fire electrical signals, form thoughts, and control actions. But that's only half the story. Behind the scenes, another group of cells, glial cells, work silently yet powerfully to make it all possible. Glial cells were once dismissed as passive support structures. Their name comes from the Greek word for glue, because early scientists thought their job was simply to hold the brain together, but research over the last few decades has turned that view upside down. We now know glial cells are essential to nearly every major function in the brain. There are several types of glial cells, each with a specific role. Astrocytes, for instance, regulate the chemical environment around neurons, making sure conditions are optimal for signal transmission. They help form and prune synapses, the connections between neurons, during development and learning. Microglia act like the brain's immune system, cleaning up damaged cells and defending against invaders. Oligodendrocytes create the myelin sheath, which insulates neural pathways and speeds up communication. Neurons may be the messengers, but without glial cells, the messages wouldn't get far. And here's what most people don't realize. Glial cells don't just support, they regulate. They decide which neurons fire, how fast they recover, and even which connections are strengthened or weakened over time. In a way, they shape the brain's learning process itself. This balance between neurons and glial cells forms the foundation of brain efficiency. Disruption in this balance has been linked to neurological disorders like Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, and even depression. In contrast, when both cell types work in harmony, the brain becomes more adaptable, more resilient, and more capable of deep focus and flexible thinking. Understanding this cellular partnership opens the door to a new way of thinking about the brain, not as a solo performance, but as a coordinated team. And tapping into that collaboration is the first step toward using your mind with greater precision and power. The human brain is divided into two hemispheres, each with distinct strengths. The left hemisphere is commonly associated with logic, analysis, and language. It helps you solve equations, structure sentences, and focus on details. The right hemisphere, by contrast, processes emotions, interprets visual patterns, and fuels imagination. It gives rise to music, intuition, and creative thinking. For years, people thought you were either left-brained or right-brained, a logical thinker or a creative one. But neuroscience shows this binary view is a myth. Both hemispheres are active during almost every task, and their coordination is where true cognitive power lies. When both sides communicate effectively, problem-solving becomes more holistic. You can analyze data and feel its meaning. You can plan a project and envision its full potential. This integration doesn't just make you smarter, it makes you more adaptable and insightful. So how do the hemispheres communicate? Through the corpus callosum, a thick bundle of over 200 million nerve fibers. Every thought, every decision, every memory involves signals crossing this bridge. And you can train this bridge. Simple cross-lateral movements, like touching your right knee with your left hand or switching the hand you use for everyday tasks, can stimulate interhemispheric communication. So can learning new skills that blend logic and creativity, such as playing an instrument or designing something visually complex. Recent studies show that synchronized activity between hemispheres leads to faster learning, improved memory retention, and enhanced emotional regulation. For instance, a 2020 review in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews found that balanced hemispheric engagement is linked to higher cognitive resilience and adaptability in aging adults. In essence, the most effective minds don't favor one side, they synchronize both. Integration isn't just about thinking better, it's about accessing your full mental capacity, responding to challenges with clarity, and finding solutions that are both intelligent and inspired. Around the age of 7 or 8, most people begin to exhibit a pattern known as brain dominance, a tendency to rely slightly more on one hemisphere than the other during specific tasks. But what many don't realize is that this dominance isn't fixed. Throughout the day, the brain naturally shifts between hemispheric activity in a wave-like rhythm. At times, your left hemisphere takes the lead. You may find yourself more analytical, focused on language, numbers, or linear reasoning. Then, without conscious effort, the right hemisphere steps in, sharpening your awareness of images, patterns, emotions, and spatial perception. This ebb and flow isn't random. It reflects a built-in neurological rhythm that helps the brain stay balanced and efficient. But here's the problem. Many people get stuck in one mode for too long. They operate from logic all day, ignoring emotional cues, or they get lost in imagination, avoiding structure and focus. When you favor one hemisphere excessively, your thinking narrows. You lose access to the full range of your mental tools. Becoming aware of this rhythm is the first step toward cognitive flexibility. Recognizing when you've drifted too far in one direction allows you to recalibrate. This could mean pausing analytical work to engage in a visual or creative task, or using logic to bring clarity to an emotionally charged situation. Breathwork, movement, and mindfulness are effective ways to reconnect and shift gears. One powerful method is alternate nostril breathing, a technique shown in studies to reduce stress and improve hemispheric balance. It works by calming overactive neural circuits and restoring harmony between the logical and intuitive parts of the brain. Think of brain dominance not as a permanent trait, but as a dynamic rhythm, one that you can learn to observe and influence. This awareness doesn't just make you more efficient. It helps you become more present, more balanced, and more capable of responding to life with clarity and emotional intelligence. The goal isn't to eliminate dominance, it's to master the shift. The more flexible your mind becomes, the more adaptable and creative your thinking will be. Understanding how the brain works is just the beginning. To truly benefit from this knowledge, you need to apply it. The goal is not to overload the brain, but to activate it in a balanced, intentional way. By doing this, you tap into deeper focus, sharper memory, and a more adaptive mind. One of the simplest ways to begin is through mindful breathing. Deep, rhythmic inhalations and exhalations send signals to the brain that it's safe. This reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases activity in areas linked to decision-making and emotional control. A daily breathing practice, even just 5 minutes, can help align the hemispheres and calm mental noise. Cross-lateral movements are another powerful tool. These involve using opposite limbs in coordinated ways, such as marching in place while tapping the opposite shoulder. Why does this matter? Because these movements force both hemispheres to cooperate through the corpus callosum. This boosts communication speed and helps rewire connections related to motor skills, memory, and even attention span. Adding creative tasks to your routine also stimulates whole brain function. Activities like painting, journaling, or learning an instrument activate both logic and emotion. They require structure and expression, memory and feeling, all working together. Neuroscientists have observed that people who regularly engage in creative hobbies show increased neural plasticity and problem-solving flexibility. Brain training games can also help, but only if chosen wisely. Sudoku, memory puzzles, or chess challenge the brain to think in patterns, apply logic, and anticipate outcomes, all while adapting strategy in real time. These games activate multiple brain regions simultaneously, making them an efficient way to engage the mind with purpose. The key is consistency. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about incorporating small, intentional actions into your daily life. Over time, these practices shape the brain, enhancing its capacity to respond, learn, and adapt. You don't need expensive tools or complex routines. Your breath, your body, and your choices are enough to begin unlocking a more integrated and capable brain. Many people operate on autopilot. They wake up, follow the same routine, think the same thoughts, and react to situations in familiar ways. While this may feel efficient, it often locks the brain into rigid pathways, limiting creativity, emotional flexibility, and personal growth. These habitual patterns are built through repetition. The brain favors efficiency, so it strengthens the neural circuits used most frequently. Over time, these become default modes of behavior and thinking. But what starts as convenience can turn into a mental cage. To change this, you must disrupt the pattern, and that requires conscious effort. One of the most effective ways to start is by introducing small, unexpected changes into your routine. Brush your teeth with the non-dominant hand, take a different route to work, speak slower than usual in conversations. These minor shifts may seem trivial, but they force your brain to stay alert and create new neural connections. Another powerful method is to question your own thoughts. When you catch yourself reacting automatically, judging a situation, assuming an outcome, or repeating negative self-talk, pause and ask, is this the only way to see it? That moment of reflection is where change begins. You interrupt the automatic cycle and open space for alternative responses. This is the core of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function based on experience. Contrary to past beliefs, this isn't limited to childhood. Adults can rewire their brains at any age, as long as they engage in deliberate, repeated learning. Practices like journaling, mindfulness, and goal setting can amplify this process. They help you observe patterns more clearly and respond with intention instead of impulse. Over time, you'll notice greater emotional control, more creative problem-solving, and a deeper sense of agency over your life. Breaking patterns isn't about rejecting who you are. It's about expanding who you can become. The brain is always changing. You just have to guide it. The belief that we use only a small portion of our brain has been widely debunked. But the real question isn't how much of the brain we use, it's how we use it. Most people activate scattered regions in isolation, without coordination or conscious intent. That's where potential is lost. True cognitive power comes not from intensity, but from integration. When your brain functions as a whole, when logic and creativity, memory and emotion, action and reflection work in unison, you unlock a level of awareness and capability that feels both grounded and expansive. This isn't about reaching some ideal version of intelligence. It's about becoming more present, more adaptable, and more capable of navigating complexity without being overwhelmed. That's the gift of whole brain activation. It doesn't just make you smarter, it makes you more complete. But none of this happens by accident. It requires daily choices: to pause before reacting, to challenge mental shortcuts, to feed your brain with movement, focus, novelty, and rest. Each intentional act builds a stronger, more responsive neural network. Science continues to show that the brain is not fixed. It rewires in response to how you live, what you think, and the habits you repeat. Even in adulthood, new neurons can form. New connections can replace old ones. Transformation is not only possible, it's measurable. And the benefits extend far beyond cognition. People who engage in whole brain practices consistently report better emotional regulation, higher resilience under pressure, and greater satisfaction in their personal and professional lives. You don't need perfection. You need awareness. You need small, consistent steps taken with purpose. Your brain is not a passive machine. It's a living system, shaped by your attention, your actions, and your willingness to grow. You are not limited by what your brain can do. You are empowered by what you choose to do with it. So now the question isn't whether you're using 10% or 100%. The question is, are you using your brain with intention or letting it use you? If this content made sense to you, don't stop here. Go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future content. Now, watch this next video where I'll show you another essential step to transform your reality. I'll see you there.